Okay, you guys, so today in this video we're going to be talking about two biggest keys in topwater fishing. So the two biggest keys, in my opinion, for topwater fishing are, number one, first thing we're going to talk about here is don't reel in your bait if you have like 10 feet difference between you and the bait and you think, oh, I didn't get a bite. Don't reel in your bait instantly. Never do that. Never do that. And I'll tell you the reason why. First time I ever threw this whopper plopper bait. This is a 130 size whopper plopper in the bone color. First time I ever threw this. Let's go back to 2017, September 12th, 2017. I had bought this brand new off of eBay from a place called Tackle Supply Depot. Great place to buy baits off of eBay. Bought it brand new. Cast it out, very first time in a lake I've never even been to before. I bombed it out there and it landed way out there, probably a good 30-40 yard cast. I'm sitting there and I'm burning it back. Well, not really burning it, about medium speed. And there's a dock sitting next to me. Kind of right here is where the dock was. And I was fishing right here, but we're gonna scoot over a little bit so that sun's not blaring the camera. So let's say that this here is actually all water, and there's a dock right here. Where this right here is, there's a dock. So I casted this bait out, and I'm bringing it right back in very slowly. And it gets with about 6 inches of line from my rod tip. About that much right there. You guys can see how close that is. About that much from the rod tip, and all of a sudden my shins and my feet, because I was wearing Crocs with no socks on, my feet and my shin on both legs all of a sudden just got splashed with water. And I felt a really hard tug on the rod, and I set the hook as hard as I could and lifted up and set it right next to me, right between me and my dad. My dad was on the other side of me. I set it right in between us, and it was sitting there flip-flopping around. And I reached down there and I lipped it, and that fish had that bait all the way down in his throat almost. And that fish was a 5-pound, 2-ounce bass. That was my personal best. It still is my personal best. Now let's go back to about probably 2016. Yeah, April 2016. This was probably one of the bigger fish that I caught at the time. I was throwing a Spro popping frog with my 30-pound braid and my big old spinning rod. Actually, it's a small spinning rod. It actually was meant for bluegill and crappie, but I was using it for a frog rod. Was reeling that frog, was sitting there popping it across the surface, and it got right there, and I popped it one good hard time, and it stayed right there with about 2 feet of line out, and all of a sudden I just see this big white ring come up, take that bait, and go straight down. And as soon as my line got tight, I set the hook as hard as I could straight up, brought that fish straight up, and set it right next to me, just like I did that big 5-pounder. And it was about a 4 3/4 fish, and that at the time was my personal best. Hit with about 2 foot of line out, if that. Now, let's go way back to when I first started bass fishing. My first really good 3-pound bass was on a black and white head and topwater torpedo. And what I did was I had cast it right next to this little willow tree. And the way I used the torpedo at the time was like this right here, just kind of a slow twitch. Actually, it was kind of more of a erratic twitch, but I wasn't moving it a whole lot. It got about maybe 2 foot of line out, and all of a sudden it just explodes. And I set the hook, and I fight it for a second. It pulls about 12 feet of drag, and I reel it back in and set it up on the bank, and it's about a 3 3/4 pounder. Well, probably closer to 3.5. But at the time, that was my biggest fish. So let's think back. I've had 4 major big personal bests. 3 of them came on topwater, 1 came on a drop shot. Okay. Now I've caught fish this past year that would have shattered my drop shot personal best by probably almost a pound. But 3 of my major big fish hit with about maybe 2 foot of line out at the most. But I always see, when I'm talking about topwater fishing, watching videos and stuff, I see people make a pitch, and then their bait gets out of that, what they call the strike zone, and then they just burn it back in like crazy, and then they make another cast right back in that strike zone. And then when they don't get a bite in that strike zone, they burn it right back in, just like that, and then they go on. If they don't get a bite there, they go on and they move. But if you look at how much distance there is between where I start reeling it, which is about right there, from right there to right here. There's so much distance in between that. That's probably a good, what, 10 feet, 12 feet? There's a good 10 to 12 feet right there. There could be a 10 to 12 pounder sitting there, and then people would never know it, because all of a sudden they think, oh, because I'm not sitting right next to that tree, there's nothing there. I'm just going to burn this bait in and make a whole bunch of commotion and then go on about my day. That's something that irritates me so much about people when they're topwater fishing, because I have caught a lot, and not even personal best, I've just caught a lot of fish with less than 2 feet of line out with a topwater bait. I've also done it with square bills as well. But I'll reel a topwater bait in, and sometimes I won't even reel. I'll just keep moving with my rod. I'll do like a figure eight like they do with muskie and pike. I've caught some pretty decent bass throwing a what was that bait? Popar, straight a Rebel Popar. And I'll reel it all the way up like this, and then I'll just very slowly kind of pop it, and I won't even reel. I'll just keep popping it with the length of my rod. And I've caught a lot of really good fish doing that, and it's just something that nobody really does, and I don't understand why. Because I mean, if you look at a muskie, I've seen some of the biggest muskies in the world eat with maybe 2 feet of line out. You know, throwing those big baits, you know, doing that figure eight right at the boat. You know, then people are going like this and everything else. They're doing all kind of crazy stuff, and they're still getting them fish to bite. But I see all those bass anglers, and they'll make a cast, and if they're not where they wanted to be, they'll just burn the bait in and make all kind of crazy noises like that, and they won't ever actually know if there was a fish in there. Tournament people, I see it doing all the time. And I'd say, because I'm getting ready to go back in the house and watch a Major League Fishing episode that's getting ready to record, I'd say that if anybody on there is topwater fishing, I'm going to almost guarantee you, if they're topwater fishing on that video, they'll be doing that. I guarantee it, because I don't see anybody who keeps their bait in the water all the way to the rod tip. I just don't see it. And I've caught a lot of fish. If you guys go way back in the archives of the Topwater King videos, there is a frog fishing video. And this was back when we used to keep bass and eat them. I don't eat them now. But this was way back then. And I was throwing it was either a Spro or a Matsuo frog. And I'd cast it out, and I had a fish eat with about maybe 3 feet of line out. I think I titled it Frog Bass at 4 feet or something like that. But it was actually closer than that, I'd say. It was pretty close to the bank. And if I had not brought that bait all the way right to the surface, right to the bank, I probably wouldn't have caught that fish. You know, there's a great tip for you. Hang on one second. Alrighty. So another huge key in topwater fishing is missing strikes. We're going to go right back over here on this side over here, because that sun's glaring off the water and probably will mess up my camera. Alrighty, we're out of the sun now. Okay, so a huge part of bass fishing with topwater baits, not even bass fishing, just fishing in general with topwater baits, is you're going to miss them. Anybody who has topwater fished with any type of fish, bluegill, bass, crappie, I don't know, any of them, they know that them fish will miss your bait every once in a while. But a huge thing that you can do to up your odds of catching a fish that missed your bait is to not throw your topwater bait back in there, but instead throw one of these guys. A white finesse worm. This is a Dock Sewer Company 6-inch finesse worm in white with a 3/0 hook, 10-pound test Berkeley Trilene on an Abu Garcia Mike Iaconelli spinning rod. So let's say, hang on a minute, let me reel this back in. I'm going to show you something. I'm going to show you where I use it the most. Now, I use this technique huge amount in the summertime when I'm fishing a frog. Now, a lot of people don't think of throwing light line with a 3/0 hook and a small finesse worm on top of the mats. But I tell you what, it works. You guys probably know this story already. I've told it before, but me and my dad done a little mini tournament. First 5 fish, the biggest 5 fish, won $5. That was the deal. And I went to a spot that I catch fish all the time in, but there was a huge mat of grass, and I could not get those fish to bite a frog. I could see them moving under the mat, but they just wouldn't touch a frog. Like, I'm not even joking. They wouldn't even sniff it. They wouldn't even look at it. They didn't care. They would just swim away. So I got sick of it. I rigged up this right here. Same thing right here. White finesse worm with a 4/0 or 3/0 hook. I think it was a 3/0. Works a little bit better with the 2/0, but if you are wanting to use a little bit of a heavier hook, you can go with a 3/0 or a 4. Now, I had this bait, and I cast it right on top of the mat, and I'm just moving it really slowly. Very, very slowly across the mat, and all of a sudden, whoom, just freaking nailed it. And it was about a 3.5 pounder, and I only caught 4 fish that day, but those 4 fish were bigger than all 5 of his. It was one of the biggest limits, not even limits, it was one of the biggest under 5 fish limits that I've ever caught. It was somewhere close to 15 pounds just in 4 fish. So another thing that I do is I'll take this same exact rig when I'm fishing topwater baits, and if a bass comes up and hits your topwater bait and you miss it, don't go and throw your topwater bait right back in there. That is a huge problem that I see people do, is throw topwater baits right back at those fish. If you ever look at the way that a fish will hit a topwater bait, especially a topwater bait that's a little bit too big for that fish, you'll say there's a 3-pounder chasing a 9-inch shad, that bass is not going to go straight for the tail. He's not going to try to swallow it whole. What he's going to do is he's going to go and hit it right in the head. He's going to knock it out of the ballpark. And then once he kills that shad, or at least knocks it out, he'll pick that shad up as that shad's falling. And it's falling very slowly, and all of a sudden that bass comes up there and he just swallows it. And if you ever have watched those underwater footages that Tactical Bassin does, the topwater ones, you'll see that fish that are pretty much too small to even bite those topwater baits, they'll hit it, and they'll hit them in the head. They'll try to kill it, because when they kill it, it's a lot easier for them to get because they're not chasing it. So let's think about something here. If a fish comes up and just knocks the crap out of your bait right in the head, and then you reel it back in and you bomb your bait right back out there, and he doesn't bite again, and people will get discouraged by that fact that the fish wouldn't come back for it. Think, oh, it must have been a small one. That's not always true. Sometimes those bigger fish just don't want to have such a problem getting that shad down. They'll kill it, and then they'll find it after it's falling off the surface. So let's think about it. If that fish comes up and hits your topwater bait, that fish is not looking for a shad that's still skipping across the surface. He's looking for a shad that's falling very slowly down through the water. So when you're throwing something like this guy right here, this little white finesse worm, just like this one right here, on a weightless hook, it's falling through the surface very slowly, through the water column. If you look at that, it's falling very slowly, falling just like a dying shad would. And when you twitch it, let's show you guys here, as it's falling very slowly and you twitch it, all of a sudden it gives a little bit of a life and acts like it's trying to come back out of being knocked the crap out. And that fish is going to see that. When he sees that, he's going to come unglued and run over there and just nail it. I've caught so many fish using what I call a backup bait. If you didn't get it done with your main bait, switch over to your backup bait. You know, any of you video game people who play video games, you know, when you're talking about like an army game like Call of Duty, if you didn't get it done with your main bait and you run out of shells, and get done with your main weapon, you didn't get it done, go to your backup bait. This is your backup bait. You go to your backup weapon. This is that little pistol that will save your life in a tournament. This is that little This is that little special item that you always want to have with you when you're topwater fishing, because it can catch you the biggest fish in the lake because he didn't want to commit to that topwater bait, or he hit it once and he thought it was a dying shad and he comes up and nails it. So I hope you guys learned something today in this video. If you did, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I hope you guys did learn something. If you did learn something new, or if you use any of the tactics that I showed here in this video, let me know down in the comments, because I love seeing your feedback. I love seeing if you have used any of these tactics before. So let me know. Thanks for watching.